Hello ladies and gents, in this video we will see how create, read, update and delete operations work with OData V2 in our application. We will begin with the create functionality, and currently how it works is we just fill these fields and then we use to push a new item to our local JSON, but since our products are coming from a remote OData service, instead, we will send a create request to our service, and let's first check our console. And if we go to the network tab, let me refresh our page and filter for OData. And let's check our metadata to see what we need to pass. And we will be creating a product, so we need these attributes. And if we check our input model that we use for creating a new product, we can see that the names match, but the category is not a property, it's a navigation property, and creating entities with complex types with related resources is a bit more complex, which we will cover later. So we will not pass in a category, and also we have to pass in an ID, a unique ID, which is normally not the case because IDs are auto-generated in the backend. But for our demo service, we have to provide it from the UI ourselves. And we also have a rating property here, which we currently don't have. So let's start by adding that one to our create new product dialog. Let's open our create product fragment. And let's go all the way down here. Let's add a new label. And let's name it rating. And the control we will use is named rating indicator from the M library. And it accepts a value of type integer. And in order to bind it to our input model, we need to create it. Let's name it rating. And let's copy it and add it to our input model here at the bottom, and the default value is 0 for it. I will not implement the validation for that, don't want it to be required. And since we don't only have the dates here, let's quickly update this title as well. And here it's dates, now let's say dates and rating, just to be thorough. Here we say dates and rating. Now we have a rating indicator, and also we have the categories hard-coded here. Like I said, we won't be sending category information, but let's use our categories entity set to display the available categories anyway, instead of hard-coding those. So here we have the entity set categories. So let's go back to our fragment. Here is our category combo box, and let's add items maybe here and bind it to /categories. And we only need one template here. Let's check what the key and value pairs are. We check the entity type, we see the ID is the key and the description is name. So let's add those as bindings, ID and name. Now if we check, we can see the request for the categories, and we can also see them coming from our OData service. Now let's see how we can send a create request to our model. Let's go back to our app controller and let's update our onPress create new product event handler. We still need the data from our input model, so whatever we enter here, which will be our payload for the request, Let's also rename this OData to payload to make it more intuitive. Then we still have to validate our payload, obviously. And then this part will be different. So let me just remove all of this and say first prepare payload. And then what we will do is send create request. To prepare our payload, like I mentioned, first we need, let's see the products again. We need to provide an ID, and again, this will not be mandatory. In a real scenario, it will be auto-generated, but here we just have to do it to make it work. And let's pass something unique here. We can say date.now and convert it to a string, and then let's say that slice -4. It will not be completely unique, but should be good enough for now. And like I said, we don't have a category field. It's a navigation property, so for now we will remove that as well. We can say delete or payload.category. And we also don't have a currency field. We hard-coded it anyway. Let's also remove that. It shouldn't exist in our payload anyway, but still, to remind us that we don't have it in the OData. And how we send our request is we get access to our model first with this.getView.getModel, and we don't pass in a model name since it's the default model. And then we say .create. And the first argument will be the path, the entity set that we want to create a new entity for. And remember, it's named, let's check the metadata again. It's named products. You can find all the entity sets in the entity container, and we will create one entity for the products entity set. So here we say /products. And the second argument is our payload, so we just pass in our payload. And here we have some callback functions we can utilize. First one is named success, and we get back a data object and a response object. Let's name them like so. And let's just log them to the console to see what they look like. And let's also finally close our dialog because we don't need it anymore. Also remove this. And another callback we get is named error. And we get an error object, of course. And as we did here, let's log it to our console. And also close our dialog. Normally we would need to handle these cases and display some appropriate messages to the users, but we will get into those when we create a full-scale application later on. Now let's just see how we use CRUD operations. Let's go back to our app and try to create a new one. Let's name it new product. Category we will not send, but let's select one because it's mandatory. Price, let's say 123. Release date 12th, discontinued next week, and rating, let's say 4. If we click on create, let me fix the ordering first. You can read about this head request. It doesn't have to succeed, so we can just ignore that for now. And here is a get request that our model sends in the background to get some entity sets. And here is our actual post request. Here we see it's sent to products endpoint. It's a post request, and we got a 400 bad request error. First, let's check our payload. It looks okay. And since we added this error to the console, we can check it from here. but we can see a better formatted one in the network tab anyway. So let's check the preview, the error and the message. It says request stream error encountered or property discontinued date to date time, which is the property's expected type. So it's very clear. It says that this discontinued date field didn't have the type of date time. And if we check the payload again, indeed we see just some strings, but they need to be datetime objects. Let's go ahead and fix that quickly. If we go to our create product fragment again and find our date pickers, we use the value attribute, which is just the value we see on the control itself, the display value. So let's replace those with date value. And here as well. And let's try again. New product, beverage, 1, 2, 3. Today, next week, 4. And if we create now, we indeed got back 201 status code, which stands for created. And now we see that we are passing date objects instead of strings. And the preview of the data we got back is the new product we created. And let's check our console as well, because we also logged the data we got back and the response object here. And the data we already checked. And let's check the response object as well. And we can see a response body, data, some response headers, URL, and the status code and status text. And now we can see we have 9 products instead of 8. Let's go all the way down. And indeed we can see our product here. That's how we send create request. Now let's see how we can send read request. For that, let's implement some functionality on our list that when we click on one of our items, products, we will display the description of that product in a pop-up. If we check our product requests, the response, we see that we have a description field for all of our products, which we don't display here on our list. So let's go ahead and first let's go to our app view and find our object list item. And we implement a type for our items, which is inactive by default, so it's not interactive, and we will set it to active. So if we check our list, we get some nice highlight and our items are clickable now. And let's also add a press event handler and name it on item press. And let's copy it and implement it in our controller. After the create, we will need the event object, so we know from which item the event is being fired. And let's use a message box control to display the description. And we need to import it, of course. Let's go all the way to the top after the filter operator, SAP message box. Let's add it to our callback function. And we simply say messagebox.show, and we need to pass in the text we would like to show. And normally how we would do this is we already have the binding context of our item, so we simply get it from our item and show it, and it would be o_event.getSource to access our object list item. Then we say get binding context with no model name, since we want the binding from the default model. And then we would simply say get property description. Let's also add a title attribute to our message box and say description. We save, go back. For the milk, we get low-fat milk with soda, Americano variety, etc. We have the description. But to demonstrate how to send a read request to a model, I will just comment out this part. first let's create a variable for our model. Let's name it allModel equals, let's copy it from here. This getView getModel, but it won't be that one. Okay, this one. And for every read request, when we want to access a single entity, we have to pass in the key. So let's also create another variable named ID equals, and we can get it from our binding context. Instead of the description property, it will be the ID. And let's send a read request, allModel.read. And again, the first argument is our entity set, which is products. And if you remember, when we first checked how to read a single entity, we had to pass in the ID between parentheses. So let's convert this to a template string. And let's pass in our ID here. And we don't have a payload since it's a GET request. And here we again have the success function. And let's only get the data this time. We don't need the response object. And in here we can again display a message. Let's copy this. Now we will get back a single product, which is inside this OData. And here we can simply say OData.description. Now let's say, what did I forgot to remove this? Okay. Now if we click on bread, for example, we get the description, but it's now coming from our OData service. Here, let's try another one. Avina Cola also comes back from the product ID3. Let's try with our product, the one we created. We didn't provide a description, so it will be empty. But we can see that the ID of our product is 8476. Now let's go back and go one step further. Instead of creating the path like this, we have a method available to us on our model, and let's use that. So we can say const, let's name it as path, equals, we say allModel.createKey. And we first pass in the entity set name, which is /products. Then we pass in an object of keys. Remember, we might have multiple keys, in which case this is even more useful. For now, we only have one, which is the ID, and the value is also ID, so we can omit that. And instead of constructing the path like this, we can just pass in our new sPath variable. And if we check again, everything still works. One more way we can read data from our model is using the getProperty method, like we did with our binding contexts. So let's also see how that would work. I will comment out this part now. And we will access it directly from our model. So we say, let's copy this message box part. And our description, we can say allModel.getProperty. And we simply pass in our path. Let's use a template string again and say sPath, which would look something like /products, maybe 1, 2, whatever here. And then we just need /description. And if we check again now, you will see that we get the same description for every product, but we don't see any request going to our server because our model already has that information here, so it doesn't have to send a separate request like we did here. Now let's go ahead and see how we can send an update request. For that, instead of displaying just a description, let's display more details that we can update. And for that, I will create a new fragment. and name it edit.fragment.xml. And let's copy the contents from our create fragment since it will be very similar. First, let's update this title to edit product and create our text maybe here. And first I will get rid of the required properties. Let's see where else. And also the validation logic. So value states I will remove to keep it simple. Okay, one here. Where else? Value state here. Okay, no more, and required. Also gone. Next, I will also remove all the model names because we will use the default model, our OData model. Let's also remove all these here, actually including these slashes. So let's select everything and remove. And now we need to be able to access our inputs from our controller to construct our payload. So we need IDs for all our inputs, but I think we already have for all. Let's see, price. Yeah, for the rating indicator it's missing. Let's give it one. Let's name it ID rating. But since we cannot use the same IDs as the create fragment, they would clash. So let's add it to all of our IDs. Let's see where. Let's see if we can do it quickly like this. ID edit something, and this will be duplicated. Let's fix that. And finally, let's update our buttons. Text will be update. Let me move this down, makes more sense. And this will be on press edit product, which we will implement, and this will be on press cancel edit product. Now let's go back to our controller and display our new dialog first. When we click on an item here, we will not display a message box. Let's also comment this out. Now let's load and show our fragment instead. And let's, as always, load it lazily. So if there is no, let's say, edit dialog, we will load it, fragment.load. We pass in an object ID. We will pass in the ID of our view. Get view dot get ID. Next, the name, which will be UI5 product list dot view inside fragments, and then edit fragment. And finally, we pass in the controller as this controller. And we say then, we get back a dialog object. And we first set it to this local variable here. And we add it as a dependent to our view, as always. Let's pass this one, and we simply open it for now. And if we already have it, as usual, we just open it. Not this one, not this one. That's open, and I see a typo already. Dialog. Another one here. Okay, now let's check. Products are here when we click. Okay, also have another typo. Fragment. I'm sorry about the more typos. I actually broke my finger like 4 weeks ago, so it's even harder to type. Let's see, edit fragment cannot be found. Edit fragment. It's okay, it's just named edit. Okay, now we get the fragment, but of course it's empty. And now what we need to do is, again, we have our products data in our list, so inside our model instance. And what we will do is we will set a binding context to our dialog here, and then we will use the properties attributes of that binding context. Now, binding context might seem a little complex, but actually they are pretty easy. A binding context is just a pointer to a piece of data in our model. So inside our model, let's check it from here. We have a data which looks like this. And like we did with the read request, we will just say, okay, take, for example, this part, depending on which product we click, and we will just point it to this part inside our model. Let's see how it's done quickly. So before we open our dialog, we say this dot edit dialog dot set binding context, and we need to pass in a new context object. Let's also import it from SAP UI model context, and it goes right here. And for our context, we need to pass in 2 arguments. First, the model that we want to use, which is our default model. So we named it O model somewhere here. Yes. And then the path of the part of the data that we want to point to. And remember, we already have that as well as path here, which is /products, which also contains the ID. And we simply pass in this path and save. And now if we try again, for the milk, for example, we have all these values. And remember, we don't have a category, so let's quickly disable that one for the edit fragment. We go combo box, okay, this one, and let's set enabled to false. And we can also set the selected key, just not make it editable. And I think it was called name under category. Let's see now. No. Let's see, category. Oh, it shouldn't be the name, it should be the ID. And now we get all the data along with the rating. Let's quickly add this cancel button so we can close it. We named it like so. Let's add it here quickly. And we say edit dialog.close. And finally, let's implement our press edit. No, press update makes more sense. Let's implement that one as well and send an update request. Again, first let's store our model in a variable equals this dot get view dot get model. And again, we need a payload for our update request. So let's create it. We say const o payload equals will be an object. And what do we have? We have a name attribute, and we will get it from our view, and I don't want to repeat that, so let's also get our view here. Const o view equals this part, and name will come from o view dot by id. Let's check the id for the name. First one, this dot get value, and next we have a price. Again, we just need to change the id. What's it for the price? This one, id edit price. What else do we have? A release date. Let's see, this one. Let me actually first copy the name, then the ID. And we have a discontinued date. This is the name of the attribute and the ID of our date picker. And this, since these are dates, these will be get date value instead of get value, which would return a string. And lastly, we have the rating. Let's see the ID of that. And this is again just get value. Now we have the payload, and let's send our update request. We say omodel.update this time. And again, first we need to pass in the path, and how we can get it is from our binding context again, because if you remember, when we set the binding context here, we already provided the path to our context. So now let's get it quickly. We can say const as path equals, where is our dialog? It's named edit dialog dot get binding context, and we say get path. Now we can use this as the first argument for our update method. Next we need the payload as usual, and again lastly we have a success event handler. Let's just get the data again, and let's display a message this time using the message box. Dot show. Let's simply say product has been updated, and then we should close our dialog. So this edit dialog dot close. Next we have the error event handler, and here let's do something similar, and instead of show we can use error here for better styling, and for this one let's use information. Product could not be updated. You should of course implement better error handling using the error object you get, but let's keep it simple for now. And again we close the dialog. Okay, now let's see and hope it all works. Let's click on milk again. Price 3.5. Let's make it 2.5. There is no discontinued date. Let's make the rating 4 or even 5. And also set a discontinued date of the 30th. And we click update. Hope for the best. 204 is a good sign, which means updated. And we already get our success message here, and we have our payload for the update, and we already see the new request. So the new data has been fetched already, and we can see it's 2.5. We can refresh the page just to be sure, And if we click, rating is also updated and discontinued date is here as well. Now finally, let's implement the delete operation. Let's go back, and here is our onPress delete. We have the list item. What we need again is the ID of our list item. So let's remove this part and say create path first, const as path equals, it's just the same, but let's repeat it. Instead of copying, omodel.create key. The entity set is again products, of course. And as for our key mappings, we only have one named ID, and we can get it from our item here, the one we clicked. .get binding context, .get property, and get the property ID. And let's send the delete request. And this time we say omodel, and omodel is not defined. Let's add it quickly. This .get view .get model. And this time we say omodel.remove. And again, we first pass in the path of the resource that we want to delete. And no payload again for a delete, obviously. And here we again have a success event handler. I will leave those empty this time to save time. And error event handler. And now let's save and try. Let's go all the way down and try to delete the one we created, new product. Click on delete. Nothing happens. Undefined reading key, let's see. Item, binding context. Oh, I misspelled the entity set. This should be products, not the entity name. Let's try again. New product, network tab, delete. We see the request. 204, good sign. It's a delete request now, you see, and 204 stands for no content, and we also don't get a response here. And it's already removed from the list. Let's refresh and make sure. And it's gone. Let's also delete another one, cranberry juice maybe. Cancel, delete. And it's also gone from our list. That would be all for this video. Thank you all for watching, and in the next video we will talk about the batch request mode with OData version 2.